Well, hello, everyone. I guess we'll start now. For those of you who have just joined us, my name is David Duplessis. I'm the CEO of the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our board of directors and our staff, it's my pleasure to welcome everyone here today to our Distinguished Speaker Series Digital Edition, featuring Douglas Jones, the President and CEO of WorkSafe New Brunswick and a fellow Acadia graduate. So, Doug, I think we may have been at Acadia at the same time. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. We ask that you click on the mute button to minimize any background noise that we have that may come through. And we also will provide you with an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session if time permits. So if you have any specific questions, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen to submit them. I'd like to take this opportunity as well to acknowledge our sponsors for this event: Stuart McKelvey, Emera, New Brunswick, the University of New Brunswick St. John MBA program, Economic Development of Greater St. John, RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, and WorkSafe New Brunswick. We really are grateful for all of your support for all of our DSS sponsors, as they have enabled us to pivot and to adapt to what the new normal is beginning to look like for connecting and carrying out our business functions. I'd like to my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Doug Jones. Doug began his 5-year term as WorkSafeNB's president and CEO on March 26th, 2018. And with more than 20 years of leadership experience in both public and private sectors, he most recently served as the deputy city manager for the city of Edmonton. And previously, he was a senior vice president with Canada Post, and before that, held a number of executive positions with Lafarge North America in Canada and the United States. Douglas has a strong passion for safety, including a commitment to rehabilitation and fair compensation for injured workers and their families. He's demonstrated a dedication to shifting corporate cultures to improve the client experience and a drive for organizational excellence, both through transformation and continuous improvement. Born and raised in Halifax, Douglas earned his Bachelor of Science at Acadia University and his Master's of Business Administration at Niagara University. He's also a certified member of the Institute of Corporate Directors and has served on boards in both the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. So please welcome Doug Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to have so many people joining us on a day like this. It's just wonderful to be able to share our message and to get a couple of key points across. And we'll also have an opportunity to, like you said, have get any of the people that have joined us to ask questions, and we'll answer those as well. So I'm going to just jump right into it. There's a number of slides here, and I don't want to take up an awful lot of time. I want to leave some time for questions. So I'm just going to share my screen and just a second. Does that come across? Is the presentation there now?
Yes, I'm able to see it, and I think hopefully everyone else is able to as well. I'm getting the thumbs up from my technical department over here.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through a couple of highlights from 2019, even though 2020 is almost over, but I'll show some highlights of our 2019 and then get into some of our financials, which will cover a good part of 2020 as well, touch on the assessment rates and what was driving those, speak a little bit about some of the points and changes that we're making in occupational health and safety, a few points on the transformation journey that we're undertaking within WorkSafeNB, a couple slides on COVID-19, how it's impacting our operations and how we're supporting public safety and public health, and then open up for questions and answers. So in 2019, and our annual report was released a couple months ago, we had some really good numbers in that year, even though it was just the start of our transformation journey. But injury frequency, which is really our goal, because we want to get workplace injuries down to zero. But we had a 10% reduction in 2018, so we had achieved the lowest injury frequency in over 10 years. So that was a real positive achievement for the province as a whole, and all the employers and the workers, because that drives better. Everybody wants to be safe, but it also drives a lot of great outcomes as far as finances for the employers as well, and a lot of other related issues like better employee engagement. So that, you know, we saw the cost decline. We also had an opportunity to look at benefits improving. For example, we had the 3-day unpaid wait was scheduled to be reduced over a period of 3 years. We saw significant improvements in our funding position. I'll show you that in a few slides. And we're getting workers back to work sooner as well. And that's where a lot of our costs were. The duration of the length of time that people are off work is our biggest cost. So the sooner we can get people back to work, the better. We went from 73% back to work in 26 weeks in 2018 to 79% in 2019. But if we look at other provinces across the country, Ontario, for example, gets about 90% back in 6 months. So that's what we're aiming for right now, is how can we understand what the rehabilitation needs are and to target best in class there. We're also looking at the quality of our decisions, and we're seeing, you know, the overturn rate at WCAT appeals reducing as our quality improves. And we're also looking at, you know, first call resolution as a measure of focusing on our clients and being able to answer their questions when they first call in, as opposed to having them play telephone tag in a number of different places before they get the answer. So that improved substantially in 2019, and we're looking to improve that further. So those are some of the highlights for 2019. We'll get right into assessment rates, because that's often what our business audience are looking at. And we'll show some of the assessment rate history. You can see, you know, obviously we had a period of stability in 2008 to 2011. The rates dropped for a period of 4 or 5 years, about half, dropped in half from $2.12 down to about $1.11, and then increased substantially, as everybody is aware. That $2.92 was what was announced in 2019. That was the high, due to the changes in legislation at the end of 2018 that actually reduced to $2.65, and then to $2.40 last year. And then we just announced the rate of $2.17 as the average rate for the province, which is about a 9.6 reduction from last year. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more because the $1.11 rates that are there at the bottom, those weren't our true costs, but those were the rates that the employers paid. This is a slide, bit of an eye chart maybe, but hopefully you can see it if you're looking at your own screens. It shows you the different components that make up our rate. And the first bar across the top shows that this is the cost of benefits for new accidents. So the accidents the cost for accidents that are incurred in any particular year. And you can see for the period of time, 2014 to 17, we were looking at about $1 for every $100 in payrolls. So about 1% of your payroll costs went to the cost of benefits of new accidents. Then when we saw the cost of our claims increasing, it started in 2016. We have about a 1-year lag when we build those cost of benefits into our rate. So you can see that start increasing in 2017, 18, and 19. And they went up about 66% from, say, $1 to $1.66. And then they started to decline to, you know, the $1.40 range. And then this year now in 2021, we've got the rate established at $1.33. So we are seeing those numbers coming back into an area, or starting to decline to an area that we want to see them in. The three blue areas, or the three blue rows: occupational health and safety cost, the cost to support the appeals tribunal, and our general administration. Those stay relatively stable. The general administration cost in 2018, you can see that was 29 cents, and most around that's 37 cents or 36 cents. That was during that year when rates were really starting to jump up. Management and the board tried to cut costs as much as possible, thinking that rates were going to peak at that year, and it was a big effort there to try and keep the rates down. But that was a short-term exercise, because rates did continue to rise until we got the legislation changed. But I guess the point I wanted to really make on this slide is that if you look at the bottom orange row, it says funding level adjustment for prior years. That is an adjustment that's made to the base rate that's in the dark blue line, but dark blue row. That is an adjustment on, it depends on how much money we have in the bank. Like if we have, if we have $1 billion of liabilities and we have $1 billion in assets, then we're 100% funded. If we have 1.2 billion in assets and the same billion in liabilities, and we've got a 20% cushion, and we would, during that period of time, we would target for a 10% cushion. Well, if we had more than that 10% cushion, we were refunding some of that money. And when you look at the funding level adjustments that are negative, like 24 cents, 44 cents, 43 cents, those are periods in time when we had more money than we needed, and we were rebating that money to employers in the form of reduced rates. But our costs were all around that $1.50 level, so $1.45, $1.55, $1.54 in that dark blue rate. You can see in 2019, 2020, and 2021, the funding level adjustment in the orange bar is not a negative number, it's a positive number, 39 cents or 35 cents. And that's because we don't have enough money in our accident fund to pay for all the liabilities. So instead of getting a refund, there's a surcharge being added. And that's going to be reduced over the next couple of years, or it looks like it's going to be anyway. And looks like we're, again, if you look at the reduction in the cost of benefits, and we're continuing to see that in 2021. I'll show you another chart in a few minutes. We're stabilizing our admin costs. The costs in general are trending in a pretty good direction, but I just wanted to outline those components. Our key financial metrics, they've been turning around. You can see our net income in 2015 through 2018. We lost money every year. The total is $640 some odd million. That wasn't sustainable. That was really the basis for our case for change and the legislative changes that we put through at the end of 2018. And in 2019, you can see we had a $580 million turnaround. And that was two things. One, it was certainly increased rates that we charged employers, the changes in the legislation, and then changes in process and policies that we put in place. But that was the first year in 5 years that we had a positive net income. And you can see that the funding level went from, at the bottom line there, 85% funded to 105%. And in 2018 or 2020, we're hovering right now to about 105% also. So that stayed pretty stable. That's being impacted a little bit just by the stock market. When this chart was prepared, stock markets were down a little bit. They've bounced back up, but they're fluctuating. So that's a number that changes a little bit every week. And we really nail it down on December 31st of each year. But we're in a much better position than we were in the last 4 years for sure. What was driving our costs in 2017, 18, 19 was really our benefit cost per lost time claim. These are numbers in thousands of dollars, and it compares the average cost of a lost time claim against all the other jurisdictions across the country. And this is in 2018. So you can see in New Brunswick, the average cost of our lost time claim is $42,000. Manitoba was at the lower end of that scale, but you can see that there was, well, everybody else was lower than New Brunswick was. And the big driver for us was really the amount of time that people were off work and collecting lost time earnings or just loss of earning benefits. And so some of that did require legislative changes. Some of it required process changes in how we looked at managing claims. And our objective is obviously to bring that down into an optimal level. And it's not about getting to the absolute lowest cost necessarily. It's making sure that we make the right decisions based on the legislation that we have. So every province has different legislation, and their costs are going to be somewhat different. But we know that we can improve substantially on the $42,000, and I'll show you that in a minute as well. So as I mentioned, some of the improvements to the legislation that took place over the last few years is we returned the policy deference to the board of directors. The legislation that changed in 2015 moved a lot of that to the appeals tribunal, and that was changed back. We got clarification that benefits apply only to work-related injuries, because some of the wording in the legislation that changed in 2015 ended up allowing or forcing workers' compensation to cover personal health care issues that would normally be covered by Medicare or just a other healthcare policies that weren't related to a workplace injury. Also, we have legislative changes that now oblige all parties to participate in the return to work process, because as I said, it's really critical that we get everybody proactively working towards returning to work as quickly and safely as possible. And so most other provinces have that requirement built into the legislation. We did not, but that's in place now for a little bit, for about a year. And as I mentioned, we've also eliminated the 3-day unpaid waiting period that had been in place since 1992. That was one of the benefits that we've put in place for the injured workers. So this is a chart that shows our claims cost trend. So you can see at the bottom, they're broken out by year. Each bar represents a quarter, so quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 in each year. And the axis on the left-hand side is that's in thousands of dollars. So if you look at 2014, you can see that in each quarter, we were spending about $30 million a quarter in claims costs. And so that was, that was pretty stable for us for 2014. Same thing in 2015, about $30 million a quarter, or $120 million a year. And in April of 2015 is when the legislation changed, when the External Appeals Tribunal was enacted, and a lot of the claims decisions were turning around, and our costs started going up. Well, like I say, the decisions that impacted our costs started being made. But it didn't happen right away when legislative change took place, because the appeals tribunal had to be put in place and structured, and then they started hearing appeals and making the decisions, and then there was the time to implement the appeals. So even though the legislation changed in the second quarter of 2015, the costs didn't start hitting our system until the second and third quarter of 2016. As you can see, they started rising above $35 million and heading towards $40 million. And then each, as you can see, I hope that you see my cursor there, they're starting to rise here in 2016 and continue to rise in 2017 and 2018. So 2018 was the peak. Now, when we set a rate, what we do is we look at the previous years. So when we're setting a rate for 2019, for example, we set the rate in the summer or fall of 2018, and the information that we have available is the previous year. So we were actually looking at 2017's rates or costs and the trend, and maybe the first 1 or 2 quarters of 2018. So when we set a rate for 2019, what our actuaries are looking at is that this trend here is we're going steadily up for 6 quarters. It's not necessarily, we don't see this kind of little drop off here. So we set the rate here in 2019 was one of the highest we had, but the legislation changed here too, and that's what caused it to go from like 292, which would have been really high, down to 265. And then when we set the rate for 2020, we were looking at it here, say, okay, well, thankfully, costs have leveled off, and we see, even if you look at this first quarter in 2019, you say, well, it's really just starting to level off. But we had enough confidence with the actuaries now that we could, we saw the rate starting to decline. What's really interesting now when we start looking at 2020 is you can see that the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter have really started dropping off. Some of this, though, we have to caution is there's a COVID factor in here too. Like not every, people weren't working as much, so you have to take this with a bit of a grain of salt. But we're still cautiously optimistic that we're going to finish up 2020 roughly at the same cost level as 2016. So things again are heading there in a good direction for overall costs. It does take a while to work these costs through our system, so don't anticipate that this is all going to come into play in 2021. There's a lot of factors that come into it, and we have to wait till the end of the year and then do all of, a lot of calculations, and the board takes a look at that in the late summer of next year. But the point of this slide is really to show you that we've come off the peak. The downward trend in 2019 is continuing, and we're looking to get back to where we were before the big cost changes in 2016. Speaking of return to work, we do have a Working to Well kit that is on our website. If you look under the employer tab, there's a lot of different materials there. We're also changing the processes and procedures and how we reach out to employers to help everybody get to a point where we can get the injured workers back to work as quickly as possible. What we want to do is we want to work with the family physician or a physiotherapist, the employer, the employee, and ourselves, get everybody at the same table and say, how can we get anybody that's been injured back to the job in a productive, safe way as soon as possible. And that's really what's going to make a big impact for the employee, because the sooner they get back to work, it's working as part of healthy rehabilitation. It helps prevent mental health issues. And but by doing all those right things, it also reduces costs for everybody. So I'd urge you to go and look at that employer tab and look for that information and reach out to us if you need some support there. Excuse me for a second. We have a prevention team also. It's been quite busy. We got 75 employees there. People often ask us, why we can't do more with prevention. We've got 30,000 workplaces across the province and 75 employees. So, they're kept quite busy. And on top of their regular work around compliance and regulatory review and educating employers and employees, they've been really busy this year around COVID-19, and they've been teaming up a lot with public health and public safety and supporting employers and looking at compliance in the hot zones. A lot of time spent in Campbellton. We got a team of people going out to Moncton this weekend to look at compliance in that area. We've been down the St. Stephen area just as we're watching people coming across the border there and supporting public safety. And there's some activity in St. John now too that we'll be involved with quite a bit. But really, my heart goes out to these guys and girls that are working on this team, because they're going into these hot spots and they have to stay safe and healthy themselves. But they're doing a great job, and they've been super busy all year long. But recent improvements to our Occupational Health and Safety Act. So we in 2019, this wasn't really so much an act change. It was really just a change in our service delivery model, where we wanted to take a different approach, where we didn't want to be out there so much writing orders all the time and being seen as police, so to speak. We wanted to be more as educators and reaching out to people and saying, how can we help you with this? Now, that doesn't mean that if we find something that is that requires an order, we're still going to write them. But what we want to do is we wanted to change the approach to say, look, invite us into the workplace. We want to help you. We want to identify hazards and risks and work towards reducing those so that you have safer workplaces. And in that way, if we're invited into more places and we get that sometimes there's a fear with occupational health and safety people showing up on site, we want to try to diminish that fear and say, yes, they really are here to help. And we've got some really good feedback from employers taking that approach. And so that's been quite positive. Changes in the Act were that we clarified the duties and obligations around employer, supervisor, and worker, because that was somewhat foggy. I'll show you that on another page. And we also introduced some penalties for non-compliance around occupational health and safety violations. And thankfully, none of those have been issued to date. And again, our focus is using education and working with employers. But if somebody doesn't want to comply for some reason, we do have the ability to sort of issue a ticket, so to speak, which is different than having to go through the provincial courts to enforce something. So that's another option that most other provinces have. The worker and supervisor obligations, our act wasn't as clear as other provinces on their duties. And we wanted to make sure that supervisors knew what their obligations and liabilities were under the Occupational Health and Act and the Criminal Code, and most supervisors didn't realize it. These requirements went into effect in January of this year. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's one fatality that took place in Fredericton a couple of years ago, and we were investigating it, and we were actually pulled off that case because it got turned over as a criminal trial. And there's the company and the individuals that are now facing criminal charges And that's the first criminal charges under health and safety that have been filed in New Brunswick, but it's just an indication of how important it is for people to know what their obligations and duties are there. And that was really the driving force behind us making those changes. So as I mentioned, we've got a whole bunch of tools that are available to us in health and safety. We've got education awareness. We can go to written orders if we have to. We've got the administrative penalties, and again, those are tickets. They start like maybe at $100, go up to $500 for an individual. We haven't had to issue any of those yet. Most people comply when they realize what they have to do. And if something is really serious, we can go down the route of prosecutions. And just to emphasize, safety is everyone's responsibility. We do have these little handouts that we provide to staff and employers or employees, and it just gives them a good reference tool to help them understand where they fit, what their responsibilities are. So also as we enter 2021, we're really going to be ramping up on our own transformation journey. And we've got 3 programs going on as we transform what WorkSafe is all about. And we're looking at how we improve the client experience, our enterprise experience, and our employee experience. So from a client experience, and our client experience is both workers and employers. And we want to say, for example, what does better look like? If we can provide the best service possible to the workers or the employers of the province from their perspective, how do we do that? And it's been a big shift in culture for us, because as a typical monopoly, over time you tend to develop your processes and procedures from an inside out perspective. You say, well, this is how our procedures work. The customers, the clients, you have to adapt to those. And things are changing in the world, and particularly in business, you have to appreciate that, no, you have to respond to your customers' needs. So as we upgrade our systems, which is part of our enterprise experience, so we're upgrading our systems, which are old, and we have to change our processes. We're doing all of that with a view to say, what does the customer need, or what does our client need? So, for example, why should you have to call us or contact us for anything? Like, can we give you access to your files, to your information through an app or some other means, so that you have all the information you need there to manage your account, to see what's going on with your files, whether you're an employer or whether you're an injured worker, if something's going on. Because we get so many phone calls and inquiries that and most of them are just for information. And so we're saying, how can we make that better? So that's around the client experience. As I mentioned, the enterprise experience, we're upgrading our financial systems. We've got client management, or our case management system needs to be upgraded. That's a project for the next 2 to 3 years. We've already moving our Microsoft Office and email into the cloud. So there's a huge transformation going on in our enterprise experience. And employees, same sort of thing. Like, we're really focusing on what do they need to provide to provide a better client experience, and understand what our new systems are looking like. Because some of our systems, quite frankly, have been in place here for 30 years. So they're very comfortable with that, and change to a new system might be quite challenging for some people. So we have to walk them through change management and give them more training, and help them understand what the shift is to give really good client experience. So there's a lot of training going on there as well. Succession planning is another issue for us, as we have a lot of people eligible for retirement in the next few years. So those are the 3 big transformation programs we're working on. COVID-19. Here's a little chart. So this was pulled off of Public Health Agency of Canada. You can see it was dated 2 days ago. And this is not total cases by province, but it's the rate of cases per 100,000 population. So you can see in the Atlantic area, you're doing fairly well. Depending on the province, in Atlantic, we're either at 2, 0, or 4 per 100,000. So that's really good, actually. But you can see Quebec is 103. Really concerning. Manitoba, you can see now they're the highest in the country at 197 cases per 100,000, and that province is really suffering from some lockdowns. I think it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. They've even changed what you can buy at stores. They want to limit the people, or the items that people can purchase at store to only essential items, so they can only go in and get those essential items and then get back out again, because there's just too much contact going on, and their cases are just getting out of control. But the rate of increase is very worrisome. The calls that I'm on a regular basis with public health, they're very concerned about what's going on in the rest of the country, and also what's going on in a few pockets in New Brunswick. This is also a chart that came out of Public Health Agency of Canada, and it just shows the number of reported cases on a daily basis. This was dated a couple weeks ago now, but you can see how the number of cases rose up to about 2,000 a day in mid-April. Then we flattened out a bit through the summertime, and now we're into the second wave. And you can see after, from November till the end of the year, you can see that blue line, that if we decrease our rate of contacts by 20, I can see the chart there. I think it's 20 or 25%. We'll get this under control and things will drop again by Christmas time. But if we maintain our contacts, even if we just maintain our rate of contacts across the country, there's the number of cases is still projected to rise considerably. And if we increase our rate of contacts, you can see it's going to increase even more. So what's happened in the last little while? This here is another chart, again, dated. This is data as of November 18th. And this is, again, total number of cases reported on a daily basis. And we have not slowed down at all. That shaded area on the far right, it's dropping off, but what that is, that's the incubation period, or a time when somebody might be infectious, or they've been exposed to the virus, but there's not enough viral load for a test. There's not enough viral load, so they would be symptomatic, and there's not enough viral load so that if they have a test, that the test would pick them up as being infectious. So often, sometimes people get a test on day 2 or 3, and what they're finding is that over 90% of those tests are giving a false negative. So they're moving the testing protocol to day 5 or later in order to pick up more. But if you look at just to the left of that gray shaded box, and you can see that there's the high bar there of 4,000 cases, and that's it's certainly not slowing down. So that's why the health officers across the country are really concerned about what's happening, and that's why when you listen to the news yesterday and again this afternoon, listen to it again, and we're increasing in New Brunswick, we're increasing in St. John. It is worrisome. We have material on our website to help give you, the latest information about keeping your workplaces health and safety. So I encourage you to look there. We've got our communication teams today working with health and safety, or with public health, sorry, to update it with the latest information that was announced yesterday. So this information on the website will be changing today and over the weekend to make sure it's the most current. So please keep an eye on there. And just a reminder that all employers, have to stay informed. Screening for symptoms is going to be critical over the next little while. Just make sure you're watching for that. Ensure that minimal contact, the social distancing, keeping your masks on, making sure you communicate and involving staff, and creating your operational plans. So just be aware of all of these things. Just got last couple slides. Mental health is really important these times as well. So you can see the top left-hand corner, over 20% of the working population in Canada currently experiences mental health issues. Mental health is certainly a big issue for many people in times of these control measures that we're putting in place with COVID, because people are being sent home. There's financial stresses. People can't see their families. They can't interact with friends. So there's a lot of issues going on in people's lives, and they need that support. And some people handle things better than others, but just be aware of people in your own work environment and how you might be able to help them and support them, because I think this is an area that's not talked about as much as the COVID, the pandemic itself, but it's certainly an underlying issue that is really important as well. And I think the last slide, just we've got our virtual health and safety conference on next week. We've got a couple of great sessions and plenary speakers. Mike Williams was, what was his title? He was the chief electronics technician on Deepwater Horizon. That was the BP oil platform that was leaking all that oil in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, how long ago was that now? 10 plus years ago. Anyway, he's got a great story about safety there, and just, you know, it's a really wonderful thing. And Dr. Lisa Boulanger, another great speaker. Registration is free, so encourage you to look at our website, spread this around to your employees. They're not long sessions, but I think they'll be quite informative, and we just want people to take advantage of them, because again, it's a weird, kind of a weird, different year with COVID and everything. And we wanted to continue the knowledge sharing at our health and safety conferences, and with it being free, I think, or I'm hopeful that more and more people can take advantage of it. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time today to join us and listening to me, and we'll just open up for Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. A lot of very valuable information there. And I would like to add and congratulate and thank you for all of your efforts to date. I know that we've worked very, very closely with WorkSafeNB to help you through some of these challenges. We know that your goal of sustainability is not fraught with challenges. And I do have a question to start it off with, and I'll understand if you're not able to answer this properly. We know that we have the highest average benefit costs in New Brunswick in the entire country. In the amount of time that people off, we're looking at 30 million per quarters in claims. Now, and I'm not sure if this anecdotally, we have heard that the percentage of the component breakdown of the users of that in terms of public sector versus private sector, the number of private sector employees taking advantage of these benefits versus the number of private sector companies. Are you able to elaborate on what that rate is, or what the percentage could be?
Not off the top of my head. What I can tell you is the numbers that I quoted today were only private sector companies. Yeah,
because we've heard, and it could be anecdotally, is that the rate of public service versus private sector could be as high as 3 to 1.
No, I don't think it'd be that. One of the differences that the public sector has, that I will share, because it's not a secret at all, but they have salary continuance in a lot of cases built into their contracts. Mm-hmm. So in the private sector, you know, you pay or somebody gets compensated at 85% of their net salary, and in the public sector, a lot of the contracts or the employment contracts have just salary continuance. So if they're off, their salary just continues at 100%.
At 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it's a little, I'd say, it's a little bit different than, you know, what some of the disability support plans would consider standard across the country. And so that it leads to some behavioral changes or differences in behavior. Mm-hmm. But I'd have to check on that. I wouldn't want to quote a 3 to 1 number at all. I don't think we're seeing things like that, but I can check into it and get back to you.
Yeah, it's just because and we've heard that along, it's between 2 to 1 to 3 to 1, somewhere in that range. So, you know, the larger percent of this cost is behavior as well. There's some behavioral changes. I think that in many cases, WorkSafeNB benefits, they're looked at as entitlements and social entitlements and things like that, which in fact they're employer paid benefits. So there is some narrative changes around that, I think, as well. So are there any other questions that anyone else has, or any comments that Doug would like to make?
One thing just I would like to emphasize, though, the change in legislation that we put through about a year ago to compel everybody to get at the table and work towards a return to work plan. So that requires both the employer and the employee to, you know, participate in a return to work plan. So that wasn't there in the past. We couldn't get everybody to the table, and there was no penalties associated with that. So now, even in the public sector, if we have that requirement. And we've got more interest now from public sector employers say, help us with this. And the penalty in such a, if either party doesn't want to participate, then if the worker doesn't want to participate and they don't have a valid reason, then their benefits are terminated. And if the employer doesn't want to participate, then they have to, there's a penalty for them as well. So there's different incentives that are in place now that I think will help us align private sector and public sector in a better way.
Yeah, and I congratulate you on some of those changes too, Doug. I know that you've worked very hard on those and some of the changes to the way the tribunal works as well. So if there are no further questions for everyone, I would like to thank you so much for adding some clarity to this. We know that you're in a very challenging time and in a very challenging position as well. And we thank you for your dedication and your efforts to help us get out of the financial situation that we find ourselves in with WorkSafeNB. So thank you very, very much. Just as a reminder, we are hosting the Premier, Premier Blaine Higgs, on December 2nd. So please, anyone who would like to listen to the Premier before he moves into the State of the Province address in January, then please feel free to join us as well. We have the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada on December 10th, and this will be the first public appearance after his announcement on the 2021 forecast and rates. So thank you once again to WorkSafeNB. Thank you to your staff as well. It's been great to work with. And thank you everyone who signed on today. Again, welcome to Deirdre Wade, the chair of our board, as well as to Mel Norton, the chair of WorkSafeNB board. Delighted that you're all able to join us. So thank you once again, and may I take this opportunity to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. I hope it's not too early, but in these uncertain times, I think everyone needs a little bit of happiness and joy. So very, very thankful for you joining us, and everyone, thank you. Have a great day. Goodbye.